For years, Formula 1 was a world with two speeds. If you had money, you flew. If you didn't, you survived. The biggest budgets will always crush the rest. But here's the twist. A hard spending limit came in, and it didn't cut a little waste. It changed how teams work, how they hire, how they plan upgrades, and even when the factories shut down. Today, I'm going to show you what the cost cap really is, why it arrived, how the rules are checked, who broke them, and what has actually changed by 2025. We are talking about real penalties, real audits, inflation updates to the cap, and published financial results from teams. But if we don't also cover what's actually included under the cap and what isn't, the full picture stays blurry. So let's start there before we dive into the biggest changes. The history of spending money in F1 is really complicated. In the past, there were no cost caps at all. All teams with big budgets used to dominate. They could pour enormous sums into car development, hire the best engineers, and build the fastest machines. Meanwhile, smaller teams didn't stand much of a chance. Because of this imbalance, the idea of cost caps was born. When it was first proposed, opinions were mixed. Some were skeptical, worried it might stifle innovation, while others hoped it would finally level the playing field. These debates set the stage for one of the biggest changes in modern F1. But before diving into the impact, let's clear up the basics. What exactly is a cost cap and how does it work? Each team has a fixed maximum budget they can spend in a season. This budget must cover most of the expenses needed to run the team. Still, a few areas are kept separate, such as the salaries of the three highest paid staff or engines, which are regulated under different rules. To make sure teams follow the rules, they must submit detailed financial reports to the FIA. Independent auditors check compliance, and breaches can lead to fines, reduced wind tunnel time, points deductions, or even disqualification depending on the severity. This system is how the FIA aims to make the whole grid more equal and competitive. So with budgets now limited, teams have to spend every dollar effectively and focus on efficiency rather than just throwing money at the car. This shift also raises the question, why was the cap implemented in the first place and when? Beginning in 2021, the cap was introduced to promote financial sustainability and competitive parity among teams, and also to ensure enough teams survive to fill the grid. It also aligns with a broader emphasis on saving and sustainability in motorsport. Now let's look at the numbers to see how it works in practice. The originally planned $175 million cost cap for 2021 was reduced to $145 million due to economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. For 2022, it dropped to $140 million, then to $135 million for 2023, and it was adjusted for inflation in future years. Before cost caps, the wealthiest teams were spending over $400 million per season, so this represents a huge change. As of 2025, the base figure remains $135 million, but adjusted for inflation, the effective cap is about $140.4 million. The final number is confirmed before each season by the FIA's cost cap administration. Teams also get extra allowances based on calendar length. For every race beyond 31 rounds, the cap increases by $1.8 million per additional Grand Prix. So with the totals clear, let's look at what really counts under the cap. It covers all car components, from the steering wheel to the tires, essential elements for running the car, most team personal salaries, garage equipment, and spare parts. And even the cost of repairing crash damage or replacing failed parts comes out of the budget. So a few unlucky races can significantly affect upgrade plans. A detail many people miss is that travel and certain staff logistics are generally excluded, but freight and transport tied to race operations are usually counted as part of the car program and included under the budget cap. In short, if it directly affects the car's performance, it's inside the cap. If it's marketing or staff travel, it's outside. On the flip side, here's what the cap doesn't include: driver salaries, compensation for the three highest paid staff members, travel expenses, marketing, property and legal costs, entry and license fees, non-F1 activities, employee bonuses, and staff medical benefits. Engine manufacturers also operate under a separate cost cap, currently set at $95 million per season, rising to $130 million from 2026 when a new generation of power units arrives. So with this foundation in place, it's easier to see how the FIA enforces the rules and keeps the cap meaningful. But without understanding how teams are monitored and audited, the whole system would feel abstract. That's why enforcement is the next crucial part of the story. Penalties for F1 cost cap violations are strict and tiered, designed to make sure the rules actually matter. Breaches are classified as either minor or major overspends. Anything below 5% over the limit counts as a minor overspend, while going over by more than 5% is considered a major breach. Minor breaches can result in points deductions, race exclusions, financial fines, or restrictions on wind tunnel testing. Surpassing the cap by more than 5% puts a team at risk of disqualification from the World Championship. To make sure penalties are fair and consistent, they are handed out by the Cost Cap Adjudication Panel, a group of 6 judges proposed by the FIA and the teams. But have any teams actually been penalized? The answer is yes. In 2021, Red Bull went over the cap by 2.6 million, leading to a 7 million fine and a 10% reduction in aerodynamic testing time for the 2023 season. Aston Martin and Williams also face fines for procedural breaches, like late filing or misfiled paperwork. However, for both the 2022 and 2023 financial reviews, the FIA's cost cap administration found that all 10 teams stayed completely within the rules. This helped strengthen trust in the system and show that the rules were being taken seriously. So, this example shows how penalties work, but the real story isn't just about fines. It's about how the rules force the teams to change their behavior. That's what we'll look at next, how the cost cap actually reshaped Formula 1. The cost cap has brought significant changes to the sport, touching team performance, finances, and their overall competitive landscape. By reducing the spending gap between teams, it has forced even the wealthiest squads to rethink their strategies. While richer teams still hold an edge, the focus has shifted from simply spending money to working smarter, planning upgrades carefully, prioritizing efficiency, and making every investment count. Features like the allowance for extra races and the inflation adjustment help keep the cap realistic across longer calendars, but now every upgrade has to earn its place. This shift is easy to see when looking at team finances. Teams now must be more efficient with their spending, carefully considering investments and prioritizing development areas. Another effect has been on employee salaries and talent retention. Limited budgets make it harder for teams to offer top salaries, which can make keeping the best engineers and designers a real challenge. Even Adrian Newey, one of F1's most famous designers, has raised concerns about how F1 salaries now compete with other industries, highlighting potential long-term effects on the sport's talent pool. These changes are crucial for understanding the new F1 landscape, but to get the full picture, we also need to look at how teams respond to the rules. Teams have come up with different ways to get the most out of the cost cap. Some even look for grey areas in the rules, especially around things like driver salaries and the pay of the 3 highest paid staff members. They might use clever accounting to classify expenses differently or work with other teams and partner companies to share resources and cut costs. Another common tactic is part-time projects. Teams sometimes put key people on projects outside F1, like hypercar development or other racing programs. By splitting their time, less of their salary comes toward the F1 cost cap. So even with strong rules and audits, there is still some suspicion in the paddock. People sometimes wonder how often teams update their programs and whether they are fully following the rules. Otmar Sfachener, Alpine's former team principal, has raised concerns that some teams might be using these loopholes without being fully transparent. Surprisingly, some top teams are even growing their staff instead of cutting down, maybe by taking advantage of these gaps in the rules. That's why enforcement is getting tougher every year. Teams have to submit detailed financial reports to the FIA, and independent auditors check them carefully. There are formal investigations, comparisons across teams, and a clear process for rivals to raise complaints. It's extra work, but it helps keep the system fair and builds trust that everyone is following the rules. Still, to really understand the full picture though, we also need to look at how the rules have evolved recently and what's coming next. In recent years, for example, F1 introduced some changes that affect both team operations and the calendar, and these updates set the stage for 2026. One recent change introduced in 2023 is an official winter shutdown for F1 teams and power unit suppliers, similar to the long-standing summer break. This break, starting on 24th December, comes on top of summer shutdown in July and August. The idea is simple: give teams and staff a proper break, cut costs, and protect people from burning out. And with that in place, it's easier to see why more changes are coming in 2026, especially with the new car formula and updated spending rules. Some items that weren't counted before will now be included, which raises the overall spending limit a bit, but the main goal stays the same. Keep the racing fair and make sure all teams can survive and compete. So with that in mind, let's step back and ask the big question. Has the cost cap really made a difference? The answer is yes. It has helped close the gap between the big spending teams and the midfield, keeping runaway budgets under control and forcing everyone to spend smarter. But at the same time, it has added more complications, like more paperwork for the FIA and occasional debates about how the rules are applied. As we approach 2026, the cost cap remains in place, with adjustments for new rules and inflation. Smaller teams see it as a fair way to compete, while some of the bigger manufacturers are careful about how it might limit their operations or add complexity. On top of that, measures like the winter shutdown and the inflation-adjusted cap for 2025 show that the rules aren't fixed. They're constantly updated and enforced, which shows that the cost cap isn't just about saving money, it's changing how the sport works at every level. It shifted spending from spend everything to efficiency, introduced real oversight and penalties, and even shaped how teams plan their calendars and upgrades. The era of 400 million arms race is behind us, but the true test has only just begun. Now, teams must fight smarter, push boundaries within the rules, and prove that brilliance isn't bought. It's engineered, reshaped into a new Formula 1, where every decision, every upgrade, and every move shapes the season.